The rain hadn't stopped for 3 days straight. Amina sat by the cracked window pane, watching muddy water run through the broken alleyways of the slum she called home. Her clothes were thin, her shoes were torn, and her dreams, whatever was left of them, were tucked away behind her tired eyes. At just 19, life had already taught her the bitter taste of hunger, of rejection, of carrying responsibilities far too heavy for someone so young. Her mother coughed from the corner of the room. The sound wasn't new, it was dry and deep, the kind of cough that stayed. Medicine cost money, and money was a stranger here. So when her uncle barged into their room one evening with his usual stench of tobacco and beer, speaking about a marriage proposal, Amina thought he was joking. He's rich, got a mansion on the hills, no kids, no drama, 70 years old but still breathing and still generous. Her uncle grinned, revealing teeth yellowed by time and neglect. He wants a wife, a good one, a clean one. Amina didn't ask why a 70-year-old man wanted a girl 50 years younger. She didn't ask how they even found her. She only asked one thing. Will he take care of my mother? That was all it took. The wedding was fast, quiet, and felt more like a transaction than a celebration. Amina wore a white dress, slightly too big for her, borrowed from some distant cousin she barely remembered. Her hands trembled as she held onto the old man's arm. His name was Mr. Idris, and he barely smiled. His skin was wrinkled like old paper, his eyes hidden behind thick glasses. But he spoke gently, always called her child or dear, and gave her mother a brand new wheelchair the very next day. He moved her into his house, a place so big it felt cold, marble floors, rooms she never even saw, and a staircase so wide she could lie across it. But it wasn't home. It was too quiet. The only sound was the ticking of an antique clock in the hallway and the footsteps of the one maid who avoided her eyes. 10 days passed. Amina played the part. She cooked when he let her, sat with him for tea in the evenings, and listened to his old stories about war, business, and regrets. But he never touched her. Not once. Not even a kiss. At first, she was relieved. Then she was confused. On the 10th day, she noticed something strange. He always locked the door to the basement. Always. Even the maid wasn't allowed near it. And every night around midnight, she heard soft humming, followed by whispers, as if someone or something was down there with him. One night, curiosity got the better of her. She waited until he went to sleep, slow and creaky with his movements, and then quietly stepped into the hallway. She didn't make a sound. Her fingers brushed the cold metal of the basement doorknob. Locked. But not for long. She'd noticed the maid's keys earlier that day, left hanging by the kitchen sink while she'd gone to fetch water. Amina had memorized the shape. She found the same one still hooked in the kitchen. Her heart thudded in her ears as she turned. The key slowly. Click. The door creaked open, and what she saw at the bottom of those stairs was not what she expected at all. She stood frozen at the top of the stairs, holding her breath as the chill from the basement wrapped around her legs like invisible fingers. The air smelled strange, not like dust or mold, but something metallic, faintly sweet, faintly rotten. Amina took one step, then another, her bare feet making soft taps against the wooden stairs. The humming had stopped. Silence wrapped around her, so heavy it felt like she was walking into another world. At the bottom was a hallway, narrow, dimly lit by a single flickering bulb. The walls were lined with paintings, but they were all covered with black cloths, every single one. Why cover art in a hidden hallway? It made her skin prickle. At the end of the hallway there was a door, thick, steel, with a sliding panel near the top like some kind of prison cell. Her hand reached out before her mind caught up. She was about to push it open when, Amina! She spun. Mr. Idris stood at the top of the stairs, his nightrobe loosely tied, his face half in shadow. His voice wasn't angry. It was low, almost sad. You shouldn't be here, he said softly, walking down each step like his bones might snap if he moved too quickly. This part of the house isn't for you. I heard things, she stammered. I thought someone was... No one is down here, he interrupted gently, except for my past. And trust me, child, some pasts are best left buried. She stared at him. Then tell me the truth. He sighed and leaned on the railing. Go back upstairs. I'll explain everything in the morning. But she didn't move, not even an inch. Her eyes went from him to the steel door. What's behind it? She asked. Who's behind it? Idris didn't speak for a long time. Then his eyes locked with hers. My wife, he whispered. Amina's heart skipped. But I'm your wife. She was my wife before you. She died 52 years ago, he said quietly. And she still lives in there. Amina blinked. Confusion twisted into something uglier, fear. I buried her, he continued, but she wouldn't stay dead. He didn't speak much after that, just took her hand like a fragile doll and led her back upstairs. She tried to ask questions, but he only repeated, Tomorrow. I'll tell you everything tomorrow. But morning never came the way she expected. When she woke up, the house was filled with strangers, men in black suits, women in white coats. The maid was crying silently in the kitchen. Amina barely had time to pull her scarf over her hair before one of the men gently but firmly asked her to sit in the lounge. Where's Mr. Idris? She asked. One of the suited men looked at her and said, I'm sorry, ma'am, he passed away in his sleep. The words barely landed. No. I saw him last night, we spoke. He died in his sleep sometime? After midnight, the man said again gently. The maid found him this morning. Amina's world tilted. She tried to speak, but her throat dried. She looked around. His cane was still by the door. His cup of tea, half drunk, still on the table. Then it hit her. If he was dead, then who stood at the top of the stairs last night? Who walked her? Back? Later that day they asked her to sign papers. His will, his assets, everything left to her. But Amina couldn't stop thinking about the steel door, about the covered paintings, about the thing, the wife, he said still lived behind that door. That night, when the house was silent again, Amina stood in front of the basement door with the keys in her hand, and this time she was going in. The keys trembled between her fingers, the weight of them pressing like guilt against her palm. Amina stood at the top of the stairs again, alone this time, no footsteps behind her. Just the sharp ticking of the antique clock upstairs and the thick, loaded silence of the basement. She descended slowly. The hallway looked exactly as it had the night before, and yet it felt different. The air was colder, the shadows longer, but most of all she felt watched. Not by the cameras that dotted the ceiling corners, but by something else, something unseen, something behind that steel door. She walked down the hallway and stopped in front of it. Her hand hovered over the keyhole. A soft wind seemed to blow. Through the corridor, though there were no windows or vents, she slid the key in. Click. The lock disengaged with a reluctant thud. She pulled the door open. The room was large, round, and lined with stone walls like an old crypt. The air inside was freezing, and in the center stood a single glass chamber, not a coffin, a tank, and floating inside it was a woman. First, Amina didn't understand what she was seeing. The woman looked young, no older than herself, her skin pale as moonlight, her hair floating like black silk around her. She was suspended in some kind of liquid, completely still. A breathing mask was strapped to her face. Wires ran from her chest to machines that beeped quietly. It wasn't a corpse, it was someone alive. Amina's knees almost gave out. She stepped closer, heart thundering in her ears. There was a label on the tank. Patient, No. 1. Mariam Idris, born 1952. Coma-induced 1973. Do not disturb. Her fingers brushed the glass. The woman's eyes shot open. Amina screamed and stumbled back, her head hitting the corner of a nearby table. Blood trickled down her temple and her vision blurred, but she saw it clearly. The woman inside the tank was staring directly at her, alive, aware, and angry. Amina didn't remember much after that. She woke up hours later on the lounge couch, a cold compress on her head. The maid sat beside her, her eyes puffy from crying. She didn't speak, only handed Amina a small leather notebook. It was Idris's handwriting. She opened the first. Fayos, if you're reading this, then I am gone. And you found her, my Mariam. The next pages spilled truths like poison. Mariam had been his first wife, beautiful, brilliant, and deeply troubled. She was diagnosed with schizophrenia in her early 20s. Violent outbursts, hallucinations, paranoia. After she attacked a guest with a knife at one of Idris's charity events, he quietly had her institutionalized. But the institution called 2 months later. She'd escaped. When they found her, she was in a fugue state, convinced Idris wasn't her husband, that he was a demon wearing his face. She tried to kill him, twice. So he did what only a man with too much power and too many secrets could do. He had her sedated, kept alive in a medically induced coma, hidden beneath his mansion for 52 years. Amina dropped the notebook. She wanted to throw up. He hadn't brought her into this house to be a wife. He brought her to be something else, a replacement, a mask to cover the guilt, to make things feel normal again. And now that he was dead, the woman in the tank was waking up. That night, Amina heard footsteps outside her room, but there was no maid. She opened her door slowly, hands shaking. Down the hallway stood a woman, in a hospital gown. Her eyes were wide, unblinking, and they were locked on Amina. Amina's breath caught in her throat. The hallway stretched between them like a silent dare. The woman stood barefoot, her hair wet and tangled like seaweed clinging to her shoulders. The hospital gown hung loose on her like it didn't belong. Her arms dangled by her sides, motionless. But her eyes, those deep, sharp, furious eyes, were alive with something ancient and broken. "Mariam," Amina whispered, even though she didn't mean to say it out loud. The woman tilted her head, ever so slightly, and started walking toward her, slow, controlled, almost like she was gliding. Amina slammed the door shut and locked it, her fingers shaking so badly she dropped the key on the floor. She backed away, pressing herself against the far wall. The sound of footsteps stopped outside her door. Silence. Then, tap, tap. 2 soft knocks, not hard, not violent, but patient, like Mariam had all the time in the world. The taps stopped, and Amina stayed frozen in place until the morning light peeked through the window curtains. She finally dared to crack the door open. The hallway was empty. No sign of Mariam, no bloody footprints, no broken glass. Just the smell of something. Sterile. And old. She rushed to the basement again. The glass tank was empty, machines unplugged, cords coiled neatly on the floor. Mariam was gone. She called the hospital, the men in suits, even the woman from the legal firm who'd handled Idris's will. No one answered. Her calls went to deadlines or endless hold music. It was like the world had closed around her. That evening the maid came back. She was pale, shaking, and carrying a small wooden box. "She gave me this," she whispered, before rushing away like she couldn't stand to be in the house for another second. Amina opened the box. Inside was a photo. A much younger Idris, smiling, standing between 2 women. One was definitely Mariam. The other looked exactly like Amina. Same eyes, same cheekbones, same damn scar on the eyebrow. She'd had it since she was 6 from falling off a bike. But the girl in the photo had it too. Her hands started shaking. Her heart felt like it was being squeezed. On the back of the photo was a scribbled note. "The blood remembers. Always." She ran to the library. Idris had kept dozens of files and family documents there. She rifled through old albums, birth certificates, family trees, and then she found it. Mariam Idris, 1 child born, female, name unknown, presumed dead, 1976. The hospital where she was born. Burned down. No official adoption records. No trace. Amina stumbled back, the pages slipping from her fingers. It wasn't just guilt that made Idris marry her. It wasn't just loneliness or regret. It was blood. Amina wasn't just his young wife, she was his granddaughter. That night she sat in the living room, shaking, crying, and trying not to vomit. Everything felt wrong. The house, the walls, her memories. Her entire life had been some tangled story she never knew she was a part of. And somewhere out there, Mariam, her grandmother, was awake, free, and most likely broken beyond repair. As the grandfather clock struck midnight, Amina heard the whisper again, only this time it came from inside the room. "You look just like me, when I was still pure." Amina spun around, heart jumping into her throat. The voice had come from behind the couch, soft, feminine, echoing, with something hollow and sharp, like it had traveled a long, painful road to reach her ears. But no one was there. She stood slowly, every nerve in her body screaming. Her eyes darted around the room. Shadows seemed to stretch longer than they should. The fireplace, though unlit, flickered faintly, like something was breathing in the dark. "I know what he did to me," the voice said again, closer now, louder. "But what did he do to you?" Amina backed toward the door, reaching for the handle. Locked. She didn't remember locking it. The lights flickered. Then, in the mirror above the fireplace, she saw her. Mariam, standing behind her, eyes pitch black and unblinking. Amina. Spun around. Nothing. But the mirror still showed her reflection. And Mariam's. "You should never have come here," the reflection whispered. "I didn't ask for any of this," Amina shouted. "I didn't even know him. Blood always knows." Suddenly, every picture frame in the room shattered. At once, glass sprayed across the floor. The clock stopped ticking. The air dropped to ice cold. Then silence. Amina didn't sleep that night. She sat on the staircase until dawn, clutching Idris's notebook like a lifeline. She thought about leaving, just grabbing what little she had and running far from that house. But something told her Mariam would follow, because this wasn't just a haunted house. It was a curse passed down. And Amina had opened the door. The next day she went into town, determined to find out the truth. She tracked down an old man named Baba Khalif, the last living caretaker of the Idris estate before the current staff. He looked half dead already, sitting on his porch in silence, watching crows circle the sky like omens. When she told him her name, his eyes widened. "You're the girl, the one from the bloodline." He didn't ask questions. He just opened a rusty chest and pulled out a worn notebook filled with symbols and names and strange patterns. She was a seer, you know, Mariam, before she went mad. Or maybe it was the knowing that made her mad. "What do you mean?" Amina asked. She could see futures, not clearly, but feelings, deaths, betrayals. She knew what was coming. She saw her husband's betrayal long before it happened, knew he'd sedate her, trap her. That's why she cursed the bloodline. Cursed it? She swore no woman born of her line would ever know peace until the truth was spoken, until someone faced her. Faced her how? He looked at her with pity. Alone, in the house, where it all began. That night, Amina returned to the mansion, not as a confused bride, not as a grieving girl, but as a descendant, as a witness. She stripped the house bare, ripped down every black cloth covering the paintings. Each one showed Mariam in a different stage of her life, a child, a bride, a mother, until the final one, a painting of her in the tank, floating, eyes open, angry. At midnight, Amina lit candles around the living room. She placed the notebook in the center. She stood barefoot, just like Mariam had been, and spoke into the silence. "I know what he did to you," she said, voice trembling, "and I know what he did to me." A wind whipped through the room, though all the windows were closed. The fireplace lit on its own, and in the reflection of every mirror Mariam stood behind her again. But this time she was crying. Amina's voice shook, but she didn't stop speaking. "I didn't know you were my blood. I didn't know he used me to fix what he broke, but I know now. And I'm not running." The flames in the fireplace grew higher, taller, dancing with sudden fury. The mirror cracked from top to bottom with a loud, slicing sound. Amina flinched, but didn't move. The air thickened, heavy like the house. Itself was breathing with her. And then Mariam appeared, not just in the reflection this time, but in the room. No flickering, no shadowy silhouette. She stepped from the far corner, as if walking out of a forgotten memory. Her skin was almost translucent, veins like blue thread beneath ice. Her hair floated unnaturally even in still air. Her feet made no sound, but her eyes were still full of pain. "You think this is forgiveness?" she asked, voice sharp but trembling. "No," Amina said. "I don't. But maybe it's a start." Mariam's face twitched. "He kept me beneath that house like a buried secret. For half a century I listened to his lies, his parties, his new loves. He called me a monster." "You're not," Amina said. "You were hurt, betrayed, by a man who should have protected you." Mariam laughed bitterly. He wasn't the first, just the last. She stepped closer, circling Amina like a predator sizing up its prey. "I cursed this house, this name, every girl born after me. Every one of them has suffered. You think you were chosen? You were bait." Amina clenched her fists. "I won't be anyone's bait ever again. You have his blood, and yours." That stopped Mariam. Her face fell. The fury slipped, replaced by something Amina hadn't expected. Grief. "I used to dream of a daughter," Mariam whispered, "one who wouldn't be swallowed by men and madness, one who would be strong enough to break the chain." "I'm not strong," Amina said quietly. "But I'm not afraid of the truth anymore." They stood in silence, the candle flames flickering wildly around them. Then Mariam reached into her gown and pulled out something, a small, rusted key. She placed it on the table in front of Amina. "This opens the third drawer in Idris's desk," she said. "That's where he kept the real files, the ones that matter, the ones that show what he did to me, and to you." Before Amina could speak, Mariam turned. "I'll be waiting. Downstairs." And just like that, she was gone. Amina wasted no time. She rushed to the old office and yanked open the drawers. The first two held nothing but legal documents and stock records, but the third was locked. She used the key. Inside was a thick file folder with her name on it. Amina Idris, subject line number 03. Her hands trembled as she flipped through page after page. Medical scans, genetic reports, psychological evaluations. She wasn't just adopted. She had been watched since birth, funded by Idris, monitored, tracked. She wasn't just married into the family. She was the final phase in some twisted legacy. Project, the last clean air, the final test subject. And then she saw the last page. Phase 4, integration. Marriage to subject is complete. Emotional conditioning appears successful. Activate closure protocol within 10 to 14 days. She felt sick. She hadn't just been used, she had been programmed. All those tea talks, the subtle kindness, the gentle voice, Idris had been rehearsing. Her breaking her in, preparing her to carry the family forward without knowing the weight of the truth. Mariam hadn't just been warning her. She'd been trying to stop history from repeating. Amina walked to the basement one last time. This time she didn't hesitate. The door opened before she touched it. Mariam stood inside, not floating, not ghostly, just her. Pale, exhausted, still frightening, but human. "I saw it," Amina said. "Everything." "Then you understand," Mariam whispered. "I do." "Will you end it?" Amina nodded slowly, and for the first time, in 52 years, Mariam smiled. Not wide, not cruel, just free. The basement felt different now, not cold, not eerie, not haunted. It felt ready, as if the house itself had been holding its breath for decades and was finally about to exhale. Amina stood face to face with Mariam, both women scarred by the same bloodline, separated by time but bound by betrayal. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The silence between them wasn't fear anymore, it was purpose. Mariam reached for a covered object in the corner of the chamber. Amina hadn't noticed it before. A large trunk, aged by dust and rusted along the edges. Mariam knelt beside it, her fingers trembling slightly as she unlocked the latch and opened the lid. Inside was a box of tapes, dozens of them, labeled by year, 1973, 2024. On top of them, a small tape recorder. "He recorded everything," Mariam said, voice like glass breaking under strain. "My rants, my pain, even your birth." Amina hesitated before picking one up. She turned it over in her hand. The label read, 1989, Phase 2, Recovery Subject Born Her Birth Year. She slid the tape into the recorder and pressed play. A man's voice crackled through the speaker, calm, controlled. It was Idris. Subject Numbers 03 born today, female, health excellent. Will place in monitored environment under assumed orphan status. She will be kept unaware of lineage. Must avoid contact. With subject Bureau 1 until final integration phase. She must never know until it's too late. Amina's fingers dug into her palms. She was never a granddaughter to him. She was a goddamn experiment. Mariam turned away, silent tears tracing lines down her face. He didn't just imprison me, she said. He erased me. He built a legacy on my silence. Amina felt her chest tighten. And when he died, the experiment ended. Or began again, Mariam whispered. The walls around them began to groan, a low creak, deep and slow, like bones shifting after years of stillness. Dust rained from the ceiling. He made this house a tomb, Mariam continued. For secrets, for sins, but if you destroy it, really destroy it, it ends here. Amina stepped back. What do you mean? The curse only lives if the house stands. The ground trembled. One of the light bulbs above flickered, then burst with a pop. Amina swallowed hard. How? Mariam reached into the trunk again and pulled out a small metal canister. Gasoline. He kept a generator below the east wing, she said, and enough fuel to run the house for a decade. If you light the tank, it'll take the foundation with it. Amina stared at the canister. Burn it all. Everything he built. The lies, the manipulation, the broken women, his experiments, his legacy. Gone. What about you? She asked. Mariam didn't answer right away. She walked slowly to the center of the chamber and sat beneath the pipework that once kept her barely alive. Her eyes were soft now, tired. This place is my grave, she whispered. It always was. Amina took a shaky breath. I'm sorry. Mariam smiled, barely. You were the only part of him that wasn't poison. Amina turned and climbed the stairs. For the first time since she walked into that house, she didn't feel like a girl pretending to be someone's wife. She felt like a woman taking back her name. She poured gasoline through the east wing. She lit candles in every hallway. She stood at the front door, struck a match, and watched it dance. And then she tossed it. The fire spread like it had been waiting all along, hungry, desperate. A roar followed, as if the house screamed through the flames. She watched until the entire estate was swallowed by orange and ash. She didn't cry. Not for the man, not for the mansion, only for the woman who never got to be anything else. 1 week later, Amina sat alone in her mother's old slum apartment. She wasn't rich anymore. There was no inheritance, no mansion, no name. But she had a new birth certificate in her hand. Amina Mariam Idris, daughter of truth, and the curse breaker. Amina stood by the window of her mother's apartment, watching the sunrise spill across the rooftops like a promise. The sky was soft and pink, a shade of peace she hadn't seen in a long time. The scent of fried bread wafted from a nearby vendor. Children laughed in the alley below, chasing a plastic ball barefoot. Life, simple, flawed, real, had never felt more beautiful. There was no mansion now, no marble floors, no antique clocks ticking in the dark, no cold corridors full of secrets and ghosts. Just this, sunlight, breath, and freedom. The newspapers had called the mansion fire a tragedy. Electrical fault suspected, they wrote, historic estate reduced to ashes. But no one mentioned the tank in the basement, no one spoke. Of the files, the curse, or the woman who had been forgotten for half a century, because no one knew except Amina. And maybe that was enough. For weeks, she kept to herself. Her mother had passed quietly in her sleep days after the wedding, like she had been waiting to see her daughter safe before letting go. There were no relatives left, just faces on old photographs, names in dusty family books, none of whom had ever really known her. But for the first time, Amina wasn't afraid to be alone. She volunteered at a small shelter, read books she never had time for. She even started writing. A journal at first, then pages and pages filled with memories, voices, visions she didn't even know were hers. Mariam's story, Idris's lies, her own rebirth. She began to see things in dreams, not ghosts, not horror. Just flashes of Mariam, young, barefoot, standing in a field of poppies. No return address. The handwriting was unfamiliar, neat but aged. Inside was a photograph, one she'd never seen. It was Mariam holding a baby. The child's face was half covered in the cloth, but Amina didn't need to see more. It was her. The photo was dated 1989, the year she was born, long after Mariam was supposedly locked away. A note was scribbled on the back. "She saved you once. You saved her forever." Tears fell before she even realized they'd come, not from sadness, but release. Amina folded the photo carefully and slipped it into the back of her journal. Months passed. She moved to a new place, small but warm, near the sea. She found joy in little things, tea in the mornings, music in the evenings. She never remarried, never looked back. The kind of love she'd known wasn't romantic. It was raw, painful, and filled with ancestral wounds, but it had taught her something deeper. You don't need to belong to someone to matter. You don't need to carry the weight of someone else's story. You can choose your own. Years later, on the anniversary of the fire, Amina returned to the land where the mansion once stood. There was nothing left, just grass and wildflowers. She knelt down and placed a single poppy on the earth. "Rest now," she whispered. "We're free." And for the first time in her life, she meant it. The curse was gone. The blood had spoken, and the future was hers to write.